Imagine opening your eyes tomorrow morning to find your bloodline completely erased. No frantic searches, no hospital stays, just permanent, suffocating absence. Back on a freezing January evening in 1984, one household in Aurora, Colorado, locked their doors, believing they were untouchable. Sunrise revealed a gruesome triple homicide. The sole survivor? A 3-year-old toddler left to shoulder a lifetime of unimaginable blood-soaked trauma. Their nightmare began exactly how all horrors do, with a seemingly innocent oversight that went completely unnoticed. 1984 Aurora offered the ultimate American dream, a suburban sanctuary for chasing the white-picket-fence fantasy. Think tranquil avenues, fresh subdivisions, and optimistic couples settling into their forever homes. Positioned just beyond Denver's shadow, it provided the perfect escape. 27-year-old Bruce Bennett fit right in. As a former Navy sonar expert stationed at Pearl Harbor, civilian life meant pursuing a singular, unshakable vision. He wanted absolute security, providing for his loved ones while grinding through aviation control studies. He burned the midnight oil over textbooks, utterly exhausted yet fiercely determined. His 26-year-old wife, Deborah, was practically raised by tragedy, forced into raising her siblings way too early. Hardship forged her resilience. Finding Bruce through her brother brought an unexpected, anchoring peace. Their youthful vows were unbreakable. Come 1983, they purchased their dream property on East Center Drive. That proud moment he gazed across their very own threshold spoke volumes about his success. Absolute silence conveyed their triumph. Alongside managing a joint enterprise, their 2 little girls were their entire universe. Vibrant 7-year-old Melissa, days away from turning 8, possessed an undeniable magnetic energy. Deborah arranged an upcoming classroom celebration, an event the bright kid dubbed her ultimate milestone. Yet that Sunday night meant an intimate, private gathering with her closest inner circle. Little 3-year-old Vanessa remained blissfully shielded in that innocent phase where monsters simply do not exist. The residence buzzed with warmth. Bruce's mom, Connie, joined his siblings, Richard and Daniel, for the festivities. Gifted a toy keyboard, the newly crowned 7-year-old bashed away at the keys, obnoxious, ecstatic, completely carefree. As the blade sliced through frosting, flickering candles illuminated the sheer happiness radiating from Melissa's smile. Authentic, echoing laughter filled the space, the rare harmony of a deeply bonded clan. Eventually, the party faded. Relatives bundled up and shared their final goodbyes. Relatives trickled out into the freezing winter breeze. Suddenly, a departing uncle halted at the threshold. He noticed the gaping garage entrance, casually urging someone to remind Bruce to secure the perimeter. Bruce acknowledged the warning, yet the cozy interior distracted him. His daughters demanded bedtime stories. During the exhausting evening routine, locking that bay door tragically completely vanished from his thoughts. A beam of artificial light sliced through the snowy blackness outside a glaring, unprotected vulnerability left totally exposed. Lights clicked off systematically. The parents retreated to their master suite, while Melissa happily succumbed to slumber. 3-year-old Vanessa snuggled deep under her blankets, paralyzed by the heavy, innocent rest of an untouchable kid. Beyond their walls, Aurora lay frozen and dead quiet. A suffocating chill choked the cul-de-sac. Yet a predator was already prowling the shadows. A phantom stalked the pavement, cold, calculating, practically invisible. He hunted without panic or urgency, just methodically scouting for a soft target to exploit. Then, he spotted his jackpot. That glowing beacon spilling onto the frost, a gaping entryway practically begging for a home invasion. 0 forced entry. He glided past the threshold, letting darkness consume him entirely. Come Monday, January 16, 1984, panicked calls flooded their business. The couple was a no-show, a completely unprecedented massive red flag. Landline dials rang into an eerie void. Connie immediately sensed the impending disaster. Maternal instinct screamed danger long before authorities or evidence could confirm her worst, gut-wrenching fears. Speeding toward their block, her stomach dropped. That fatal driveway entrance remained shockingly unsecured. Approaching the property, a sickening stillness hung in the air. She blindly crossed the threshold. An oppressive, heavy quiet slammed into her, a traumatic stillness that suffocates your lungs before your brain registers the carnage. Edging into the hallway, she glanced at the lower staircase, and her mind entirely shattered. You ever wonder what the human brain does when it confronts an absolute nightmare? Reality simply shatters. You desperately cling to the normalcy of 10 seconds prior, but that reality is utterly gone, replaced by pure terror, so you run. Banging frantically on the house next door, her cries tore through the quiet morning air until somebody finally answered. The horror, waiting inside those walls, fractured Connie's soul permanently. The resulting manhunt stalled out for decades, all because the phantom who slipped out the back effectively vanished into thin air. Well, nearly zero identity, devoid of features, just a dark silhouette swallowed completely by the winter storm. Yet hidden deep within that deadly quiet, cold truths lay dormant, biding their time. Dispatch caught the frantic 911 dial at 10:28 in the morning. When patrol cars finally swarmed East Center Drive, Connie stood frozen on the frosted grass, trapped in absolute silence. Her vocal cords had simply given out. A chilling, vacant stare replaced the panic, the unmistakable look of a fractured psyche escaping a reality too agonizing to endure. She had crossed the threshold. She witnessed the slaughter firsthand. Those images were permanently seared into her brain. Cops bypassed her, sweeping the property, discovering Bruce crumpled near the bottom step. Lying motionless at the staircase base, he bore the unmistakable marks of an absolutely savage struggle. The massive cranial impacts painted a picture of unhinged rage, a relentless blitz that continued swinging way past any logical stopping point. Ripped patches of hair littered the tile, smeared against the drywall, and trailed up the wooden steps. Yet those vicious strikes weren't the killing blows. A lethal strike revealed the killer's true motive standing over a struggling, desperate father. The phantom made a cold, calculated decision to finish him off. Bruce hadn't gone down easily. Crimson smears clawing up the handrail proved it, a dying protector fiercely attempting to crawl back up to defend his loved ones. His body simply quit before he made it. Upstairs in the primary suite, Deborah lay lifeless against the mattress frame. The chaotic debris surrounding her painted a grim picture before investigators even examined the remains. Ripped-out cabinets, garments scattered everywhere, and a violently gutted pocketbook tossed onto the carpet. The perpetrator tore through the space erratically, hunting for quick money, completely unbothered by the mess left in their wake. Before being silenced forever, she endured unimaginable suffering. Even a 20-year murder squad veteran physically couldn't stomach the sight, pivoting away from the carnage. Lingering at the threshold with clenched teeth, he stared blankly at the hallway paint for a second before pushing through the revulsion. Duty called, no matter how hideous. The final doorway belonged to the children. 7-year-old Melissa lay crumpled between the matching frames. The surrounding destruction hinted at a deeply sinister, methodical malice. A little throw blanket deliberately masked her features, her tiny arms still raised defensively against the impending doom. Defensive wounds painted a tragic tale of survival. But a brave 7-year-old battling a monster in pitch blackness never stood a chance. The adjacent mattress was completely saturated in crimson. Suddenly, a rescue worker caught a peculiar noise. Barely an audible whisper. He crept toward a tight wedge, separating the frame from the baseboard, and knelt into the shadows. Wedged firmly inside that tiny crevice hid 3-year-old Vanessa, clinging to a fading pulse. Denver trauma surgeons called her survival a statistical impossibility. This time, they weren't exaggerating. The toddler endured catastrophic trauma that baffled medical professionals, alongside sickening evidence of physical violation. Hemorrhaging severely, medics pumped several pints into her tiny veins just to keep her heart beating. She slipped into deep unconsciousness mid-transit. Her prognosis remained entirely up in the air. The grieving mother, fresh from discovering her family slaughtered, camped out in the emergency ward, desperately begging the universe to spare the final survivor. Defying every medical odd, the little girl refused to fade. Meanwhile, the crime scene investigation kicked into overdrive. Forensics teams meticulously scoured the property, bagging microscopic traces in hopes of eventually unmasking the phantom. Crimson-stained tread marks littered the hardwood, a distinct outdoor shoe mapping out the slaughter before vanishing right back into the winter flurry. The impressions didn't match a single invited guest. This stranger had absolutely zero business crossing their threshold. A bloodied blade turned up buried in a nearby drift, pulled straight from the family's own butcher block and turned into a weapon. Curiously, the bludgeoning tool vanished. The assailant smuggled it inside and deliberately carried it away. That glaring absence screamed volumes to seasoned detectives. This wasn't some impulsive crime of passion gone terribly wrong. Our suspect arrived fully equipped, executing a deadly mission with an absolute guarantee of escaping into the night. One drop of blood. That was the only clue labs in 1984 could pull, since profiling tech was years away from reality. Detectives boxed up those vials, while a phantom faded into the freezing midwinter shadows, leaving zero trace behind. No identity, just heavy treads melting into the fresh powder. Yet, local detectives shivering at that crime scene missed the most terrifying detail. This predator had hunted before, many times. The monster vanished, yet the grim breadcrumbs he dropped revealed a chilling saga rooted deeply in the past. We spend almost 15 relentless days dissecting each mystery here, hunting down buried documents and honoring memories that demand justice. If you value this deep dive, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us below what chilled you most. Check the description for further unsolved mysteries. Returning to the shadows, the Bennetts weren't his debut targets. This specific truth makes the entire nightmare radically more disturbing. Before Bruce, Deborah, and Melissa were violently taken, this shadow had shattered multiple households, remaining entirely off the grid. Law enforcement was totally blind to the pattern. Let's rewind 12 days. January 4th, 1984, Aurora, Colorado. James and Kimberly Havenchild drifted to sleep, expecting a totally normal Tuesday. James wrapped up a casual evening tracking audio for a buddy, a mundane routine born from a false sense of security. Kimberly was asleep. Silence filled the property save for a gaping garage bay. Then, past midnight, the room's atmosphere shifted. Agony jolted Kimberly awake. A brutal, blinding impact crushed against her skull without a single sound. Before her lungs collapsed in terror, she glimpsed a towering shadow shifting above the mattress. James rushed in, instantly catching a heavy steel tool to the cranium. Bone cracked, dropping him cold before squads ever arrived. The intruder drained Kimberly's wallet, leaving a trail of deep winter tracks that completely evaporated at the asphalt. Both miraculously survived. Aurora prematurely relaxed. Fast forward, January 10th, Lakewood, Colorado. 50-year-old Patricia Smith relocated from Nebraska to assist her child's relocation. Neighbors universally painted her as endlessly compassionate and elegant. On that fateful Thursday, she knocked out chores, grabbed takeout, and returned indoors. Her meal sat perfectly undisturbed when her kid walked in later, a chilling snapshot of a life abruptly frozen. Patricia lay sprawled across the family room. She endured unimaginable savagery, suffering both extreme blunt trauma and profound intimate defilement. Afterward, the monster draped her remains, meticulously hiding his sins under a faded yellow cartoon bear quilt stolen right from her grandkid's playroom. The steel mallet used to end her rested just inches away. A tossed handbag sat upstairs while a glowing TV buzzed to nobody. This woman had zero feuds or dark secrets. She merely walked into a residence sporting another wide-open bay door. Hours later, roughly 25 miles out, 28-year-old stewardess Donna Dixon parked inside her unit. Her partner Ron was airborne overnight. Exiting her vehicle, a sudden strike crushed her temple. Total blackout hit before her brain could process the ambush. Come morning, Ron tracked thick crimson drops leading to the master suite, discovering Donna clinging to the absolute edge of existence. How she crawled indoors remained a total blank. The parking structure was entirely scrubbed from her mind, along with the mug of the devil standing inches away. That mental blind spot concealing the assailant's identity was permanent. Neurological damage wiped the slate entirely clean. The sheer violence didn't just shatter her peace, it physically destroyed the sole optical clue needed to nail him, completely obliterated by his own brutal swing. Meanwhile, a drenched steel mallet rested calmly on her car's front upholstery. 3 ambushes, 12 days, 2 municipalities, a blunt tool, gaping entryways, intimate violation, snatched bills, and 0 additional theft. For Patricia, a draped quilt pointed to a twisted psychological quirk, a desperate urge to veil his carnage while compulsively repeating it. When detectives finally cross-referenced the files, the terrifying blueprint became glaringly obvious. Identical tools, matching access points, a mirrored dance of destruction. Yet this phantom outpaced the bureaucratic machine spanning isolated precincts, 0 digital networks connecting them, relying strictly on analog cops shuffling paperwork across borders against a ticking countdown. By January 24th, federal profiler Ron Walker stepped in. Digesting the crime scene Polaroids and forensic reports, he painted a stark, rapid-fire psychological portrait of their ghost. Caucasian guy. Early 20s. Barely educated, definitely lacking any formal schooling, who learns to build a house just to sneak inside. Profilers envisioned a cold, methodical tradesman, a ghost who understood residential framing well enough to float through hallways completely undetected. He never obsessed over targets or stalked anyone in particular. He merely craved crimes of opportunity, prowling for unlocked entryways. Then came the profiler's chilling diagnosis that froze everyone's blood: this predator keeps killing until he's caged or in a body bag. Panic was tearing the entire neighborhood apart. Folks who formerly left doors wide open now obsessively secured deadbolts nightly. Local shops completely sold out of security hardware. Residents kept firearms on their nightstands. Bizarrely enough, terrified citizens were legitimately strapping on hard hats before going to sleep. This wasn't irrational anxiety. It was a completely justified dread that a monster lurked outside, praying for an unlatched window. Suddenly, the bloodshed simply ceased. The late-night emergencies vanished from Colorado entirely, replacing horrific carnage with an eerie, suffocating quiet. While citizens prayed for peace, that ominous psychological profile lingered. A killer like this doesn't just quit. The dead air meant he had relocated. As mourning locals dug graves, their phantom assailant slipped across state lines. He vanished without an identity or a single recognizable sketch, leaving behind an inexplicable reign of terror. He didn't retire his gruesome hobby, he took it on the road. January 27th, 1984, Kingman, Arizona. Exactly 11 days following that horrific massacre, an agonizing strike jolted Roy Williams awake. An unknown intruder hovered above him, viciously bludgeoning him with a makeshift weapon scavenged from the property. The assailant hadn't brought a blade. He used a massive rock, ensuring a brutally intimate connection between his bare hands and his victim's skull. Bleeding out, the victim stared into his attacker's eyes and pleaded, "What is the reason for this?" Dead quiet. The beating miraculously paused. Perhaps the sheer vulnerability of that plea triggered a bizarre psychological short-circuit. The phantom hesitated before simply strolling away. Defying death, the homeowner endured 100 stitches and shattered ribs, but crucially, he memorized the assailant's features. Within a couple of hours, local law enforcement noticed a grubby hitchhiker attempting to flag down interstate traffic just down the road from the crime scene. The cop initiated a quick interrogation before checking the suspect's footwear. Those soles perfectly aligned with the bloody footprints left behind. The drifter bolted. Backup cornered the exhausted fugitive hiding in nearby brush, finally stripping away his freedom. Authorities identified the 23-year-old as Alex Christopher Ewing. Peeling back his history didn't reveal a criminal mastermind. It exposed a terrifying reality, a violent nomad who had never faced real consequences. He possessed a rap sheet spanning 6 different states, bouncing around too quickly to register on anyone's radar. After cycling through juvie and temporary foster homes, he routinely abandoned every placement within a fortnight. 1983 brought him to Denver area construction sites. He physically built the exact suburban homes he later prowled properties, bordering desolate fields with poorly secured entryways. Instead of obsessing over individuals, he scanned residential blocks for structural weaknesses like an apex predator. Those idyllic cul-de-sacs served as his twisted masterclass in infiltration. Fast forward to August 1984. During a routine prison transport between lockups, the transport van idled at a Nevada gas station. Escort officers casually stepped inside to settle the tab. As fumes choked the desert heat, that convenience store chime signaled a fatal mistake. The inmate was supposedly using the bathroom until he completely vanished. Rocking a glaringly obvious prison uniform, he confidently strolled off into the blinding sunlight. Clueless deputies only noticed the escape when another convict pointed it out. But the predator had already melted into the surrounding suburbs. Later that evening, a restless toddler woke Nancy Berry from a deep slumber beside her husband. Heading to the kitchen for formula, she locked eyes with a shadowy figure gripping a wooden club. She bolted upstairs, but the intruder gave chase. The ensuing bedroom massacre was a relentless, bloody nightmare. Chris sustained catastrophic skull fractures, resulting in irreversible neurological trauma. After having her fingers crushed, Nancy faked her own death. By playing a lifeless corpse, she miraculously short-circuited his rage once again. The sociopath calmly abandoned his bloody weapon on the dining table and exited. Praying he was truly gone, she desperately dialed 911. The fugitive spent 4 grueling days navigating barren wasteland without supplies. Survival by sheer momentum was his only true skill. Then, an alert switchboard worker tipped off authorities. She intercepted a sketchy toll charge near Lake Mead, listening as a desperate voice begged a family member for a getaway ride. Park police cornered the parched killer lingering by the receiver. Despite functioning on empty, he still attempted to flee. A drawn service pistol finally broke his stride. "Drop it, or you're dead." The chase ended. A swift 2-hour court session slapped him with 110 years, the absolute maximum. Did the justice system lose a monster, or intentionally bury him? The magistrate didn't just want this guy penalized. They wanted him permanently erased from society. Ewing vanished into the belly of a Nevada penitentiary. After that, to the state of Colorado, it was like the guy just evaporated into thin air. His paperwork gathered dust in a Nevada drawer, while a Colorado family suffocated in sorrow. Back in 1984, state lines were practically insurmountable fortresses. Decades of critical clues hovered in the dark, 30 agonizing years passing without a single connection. Honey Bennett showed up to every single briefing. Whenever the receiver chimed, she grabbed it, praying for that one breakthrough call. Vanessa navigated a shattered childhood. Haunted by a massacre her mind had completely blacked out. Her physical scars proved the horror was real, while Ewing decayed quietly behind bars, a model inmate flying entirely under the radar. A phantom doing his bid in total secrecy. That is, until he started drafting his release forms and launching online romance profiles, dead set on tasting freedom. The guy was entirely clueless about the trap tightening around him. Because the smoking gun? It never actually left. This is the exact detail that turns your stomach when diving deep into the investigation's shadow. The undeniable biological footprint of a slaughter was locked inside a Colorado warehouse for decades, bagged, tagged, and lurking in the dark. It hadn't moved an inch. Human ingenuity just lacked the tools to decode the killer's dark secret. On the grim evening of January 16th, 1984, crime scene techs scoured the Bennett residence. They extracted bodily fluids from the rug underneath Melissa's corpse and the sisters' bedsheets, methodically swabbing, bagging, and documenting every drop. Detectives knew exactly what they held in their hands. This fluid was the butcher's calling card, a pure, irrefutable piece of the monster himself. Yet once those vials hit the state lab, the resulting report slammed the door shut on their only solid lead. They could determine a blood group, and absolutely nothing else. In 1984, forensic science hit a brick wall right there. Grouping the blood only shrunk the suspect list down to a few million random guys, offering exactly zero actionable intelligence. Consequently, those vials were vaulted and forgotten, clinging to a desperate prayer that future lab methods might finally expose the phantom they contained. Half a decade vanished. By 1989, a detective digging through the archives stumbled across a glaring, unforgivable mistake. The children's blanket, arguably the most crucial physical artifact pulled from that slaughterhouse, had mysteriously bypassed the forensic queue. Not tested in 1984, nor any year after. Confiscated, catalogued, and then inexplicably abandoned. 5 excruciating years rotting in cardboard, completely ignored. While a shattered Vanessa was painstakingly figuring out how to take her first steps again, learning to speak, and navigating a newly terrifying reality, that vital blanket was quietly decaying just 2 miles down the road. They scrambled to fix the screw-up. The fabric was finally shipped off for analysis, but it took 12 agonizing months to hear back. It yielded an incomplete sequence, a total dead end. Then, in 1990, a tiny, almost invisible biological speck was unearthed deep inside the archive. It was a microscopic thread that could pull the mask right off the butcher's face. They rushed it to a specialty lab, treating the speck like the Holy Grail, brimming with a dangerous amount of optimism. But the analysis completely vaporized the material. The exact scientific method meant to expose the killer literally incinerated their only shot at finding him. 0 answers. No sequence. Just an echoing void that guaranteed this investigation was plunging into an agonizingly deep freeze. The 1990s bled away. The files remained officially active but fundamentally frozen, that icy purgatory where leads dry up, society moves on, and only the victims remain trapped in their nightmare. Ancient hard drives churned through digital registries that offered absolutely zero traction. Manila folders bulked up with nothing but shattered theories and false suspects. The forensic science of that era was impressive, sure, but it wasn't equipped for a magic trick like this, not by a long shot. But cut to 1999. State detectives circled back to the vaults, armed with cutting-edge extraction methods. That impenetrable brick wall from 1984 was gradually crumbling as technicians meticulously picked apart the decaying organic material. By 2001, they struck gold. A flawless genetic blueprint, 1 in 18 million. Forget vague blood groups or broken fragments. This was the ultimate prize. 17 agonizing years post-massacre, the crime scene finally spit out its darkest secret. The stubborn cops who refused to let this file die finally let a sliver of genuine optimism crack through their cynicism. They blasted the sequence through the federal registry, crossing their fingers against millions of criminal swatches coast to coast. A total ghost. The blueprint was crystal clear, practically screaming a name, but that specific monster just wasn't lurking in their digital web. They held a master key to a lock that hadn't been built yet. Cue another 15 grueling years of absolute nothing. Connie was pushing into her 70s by this point, still attending briefings, still demanding answers, suffocating under the trauma of a January 1984 dawn that held her hostage. Cops cycled the code through the federal database one more time, a desperate Hail Mary for a ghost they swore they'd catch. The lab results finally dropped. No suspect yet, just a terrifying link. Genetic markers from the Bennett slaughter perfectly mirrored a separate cold case, Patricia Smith, butchered in Lakewood on January 10, 1984. 2 separate bloodbaths in 2 different towns, tethered together by a single microscopic footprint. Decades of gut feelings and behavioral theories were suddenly absolute, hard science. Detectives immediately shipped the evidence over to Parabon Nanolabs. Relying strictly on that biological residue, genetic experts reverse-engineered the phantom's exact physical traits. They mapped out complexion, iris hue, bone structure, and ethnic background, conjuring a suspect straight from cellular data, needing 0 eyewitnesses. A digital mask materialized. No identity, no mugshot, but after 32 agonizing years, an actual visual surfaced. Connie Bennett stared directly into it. It provided a crucial puzzle piece, far surpassing any previous clues, yet the database stubbornly refused to spit out a matching identity. During that exact time frame, Nevada enacted legislation demanding biological swabs from all incarcerated felons for the National Registry. It should have been rapid. It absolutely was not. The legislation launched utterly devoid of strict timelines, lacking any definitive completion target. Consequently, the process crawled forward like a bureaucratic nightmare, sluggish, erratic, and utterly unsupervised, drowning beneath towering administrative delays and apathetic attitudes. Finally, deep inside a Nevada penitentiary, authorities scraped the cheek of Alex Ewing. Guards sealed his biological evidence and tossed it onto a massive backlog. It gathered dust for 2 years. 2 agonizing years passed. Connie grew older. Vanessa endured her crippling injuries, and that high-tech suspect sketch glared uselessly from a folder, hiding a nameless monster. 24 months drifted by while Ewing happily drafted his early release paperwork, while he actively browsed romantic matches online, utterly convinced he would soon stroll past those penitentiary gates as a liberated citizen. Suddenly, just 1 week after his swab actually hit the federal servers, the registry screamed. A flawless, indisputable, terrifying hit. That microscopic stain lifted off the rug underneath Melissa Bennett back in 1984 finally pointed to its dark source. 34 agonizing years. A ruined strand, a blanket ignored for 5 long years, an unsecured registry, and a toothless legal mandate. The clues never surrendered. They were simply waiting patiently for modern technology to inevitably catch up. Meanwhile, locked inside that Nevada cell block, an inmate anticipating his imminent release remained completely oblivious that forensic innovation had just slammed the door shut. The notification dropped on a quiet Tuesday night, July 10th. 2018, at exactly 9:15. Investigator Steve Connor had obsessed over the Bennett slaughter for countless seasons. He had internalized the grim archives like a heavy burden permanently strapped to his back, absorbing not merely the raw data, but the agonizing emotional toll. The ruined celebration, the breached entryway, those ominous winter tracks, the haunting image of Vanessa wedged against the mattress, clinging to life. Then his mobile buzzed. His captain broke the silence. The federal database flagged a suspect for the Bennetts. Connor demanded the source. A convict sitting in Nevada. Just 1 week. That fleeting time frame was all it required once Ewing's swab hit the mainframe. Over 3 decades of absolute static, instantly shattered in 1 week. Connor pressed for the identity. The answer, Alex Ewing. The veteran detective immediately tore through every log, interview, and person of interest compiled over 3.5 decades of relentless tracking, endless mountains of paperwork, and hundreds of useless rabbit holes. Yet Alex Ewing remained a total ghost. He was completely absent from anonymous tips, routine criminal screenings, and every single sentence within an archive heavily bloated by frustrating false starts. Buried deep inside that mountainous evidence room, despite massive manpower and exhausted resources, the Phantom's identity remained totally undiscovered. This monster breached a suburban home, annihilated a household, and evaporated so flawlessly that 34 years of elite policing couldn't generate even a whisper of his existence. An absolutely flawless, untraceable stalker. Before executing an arrest, investigators required hard corroboration beyond a digital alert, prompting a Colorado unit to fly toward Nevada. They carefully hid their true intentions regarding the suburban slaughter, framing the sit-down as a mundane, standard prison interview to keep him completely relaxed. The convict spilled easily, casually discussing his dad's lengthy military service. He rambled about surviving a brutal spinal infection, a sickness he claimed drastically warped his personality and fractured his core psychological makeup. Suddenly, completely unprompted by the interrogators, he pivoted toward his employment history, detailing manual labor gigs around Aurora and Lakewood, the exact subdivisions and identical blocks, where 4 innocent victims were slaughtered within a 12-day bloodbath. Voluntarily, he positioned his younger self right at ground zero. He confirmed his presence doing blue-collar jobs that effectively provided the ultimate camouflage throughout those booming, under-construction communities. The investigators maintained stone-cold expressions, absorbing every chilling word. 24 hours later, they returned gripping visual evidence. 6 grayscale prints dropped onto the interrogation table. Bloodshed, corpses, and classified angles from unsolved massacres he was never previously questioned about. The inmate inspected every single picture, stubbornly rejecting any involvement, radiating the chilling composure of a psychopath who had concealed his atrocities for 34 years, locking the guilt away in a dark vault. Suddenly, an investigator slid a vivid, full-color snapshot across the metal desk. Patricia Smith, captured vibrantly alive, a bright woman in her early 50s. Who was the smiling woman in the file? Just a sweet Nebraska transplant, a devoted mother and grandmother. Ewing barely glanced at her, his pulse practically flatlining with icy indifference. Then the interrogator dropped the ultimate wild card onto the table. Patricia Smith. They showed him the exact nightmare her daughter walked into: a blood-soaked Winnie the Pooh blanket, documenting the absolute butchery inflicted on January 10th, 1984. The suspect's facade cracked instantly. It wasn't an explosive outburst, just a chilling, silent shift behind his gaze, a deeply unsettling deadness, entirely unlike his previous calm. The arrogant swagger he'd maintained for 48 hours shattered silently, like thin ice plunging into freezing water, before he muttered about a total misunderstanding. He immediately lawyered up. A judge signed off, and investigators forcefully took his genetic sample. The lab work came back bulletproof. Biological evidence scraped from beneath Melissa Bennett, paired with the horrors of Smith's floor, pointed exclusively to Alex Christopher Ewing. It was an absolute, undisputed lock that obliterated any chance of a courtroom fairy tale. By August 10th, 2018, local authorities faced a sea of flashing press cameras. The monster was officially identified, but dragging him to justice would be an absolute nightmare. Tucked away in a Nevada lockup, this predator had been secretly paving his way out for months. Filing release petitions and crafting personal essays, the psychopath firmly believed his ticket was punched. He even had a romantic profile prepped. He was entirely focused on a fresh start on the outside. For him, reality had essentially hit pause back in 1984. He played the ultimate ghost behind bars, totally under the radar, and perfectly invisible, while forensic science evolved dramatically, letting him foolishly believe his sins were permanently buried. They weren't. Justice had been silently stalking him the whole time, creeping relentlessly through dusty evidence lockers and cutting-edge genetic servers. The reckoning had finally arrived at his doorstep. Warrants flew out of Colorado, triggering an instant legal counterattack. His defense threw everything at the wall, challenging jurisdictional rights, attacking genetic chain of custody, and exploiting every minor loophole to delay the hammer dropping. They stalled for 16 agonizing months. Every time a judge shut them down, another desperate brief appeared. Every dead end spawned a new appeal. It was the frantic flailing of a cornered predator realizing his cage was finally shrinking. Nevada's top justices reviewed the smokescreen, then swiftly crushed his entire defense. The science was undeniable, the jurisdiction rock solid. Ultimately, the nation's highest judicial bench washed their hands of him. The federal Supreme Court glanced at the desperate plea and slammed the door. August 2020. 36 years after vanishing into that bitter winter night, heavily armed marshals dragged him onto a flight bound for Denver. The jet cut through the freezing altitude, revealing the sprawling eastern metro grid under a pale morning glow. The identical subdivisions, the same endless asphalt grids where innocent couples still bought homes chasing the American dream. Fresh powder coated the lawns. It was the exact chilling frost from January 1984. The week 3 graves were dug while a battered toddler clung to a ventilator. The killer hit the tarmac in heavy irons. He was back where Bruce sacrificed countless evenings for a stolen future. Back where Deborah had proudly secured her first real family sanctuary. Exactly where little Melissa fell asleep smiling after her final celebration. And right where shattered Vanessa had been discovered wedged against a baseboard, fighting a miraculous battle against death. Prosecutors immediately slapped him with multiple counts of premeditated homicide upon arrival. For 34 years, he ghosted through state lines and cell blocks, treating his blood-soaked secrets like fading memories that distance could erase. Except local detectives never dropped the scent, ensuring his darkest sins would finally rip him apart. After 34 years of dodging shadows, the phantom executioner was finally hauled back to answer for his massacre. The gavel dropped in July 2021, 37 years removed from that tragic birthday cake, 37 years since a breached garage, and decades after Connie stumbled into a slaughterhouse that permanently destroyed her reality. The gallery felt suffocatingly silent, the kind of dead air born from unspeakable horrors. The state methodically dropped their bombs. The genetics, the psychological blueprint that had practically named him back in 1984, and the gruesome thread linking the Bennett slaughter to Smith's execution, the damning forensic footprints, and an airtight chronological web, woven over decades until the monster's reflection was undeniable. He sat completely paralyzed, right up until Vanessa Bennett took the stand. Now a resilient 40-year-old woman, she was that same mangled toddler pulled from the bloody floorboards, the ultimate medical anomaly. The broken child Connie had desperately begged a higher power to save in a sterile ICU lobby. She stood dead center in a Colorado courtroom, locking eyes with the monster who stole her entire world before she even knew what a world was. Her gaze never wavered as she broke the silence. "I was robbed of the person I was meant to become," she stated, her voice chillingly hollow. Zero theatrics. Just raw, unfiltered truth about the absolute hell one night in 1984 unleashed on her entire existence. My mind broke. I stare into the mirror daily and despise the reflection. I loathe the nightmare I survived and the waking terror I still endure. I punish myself. I drowned in narcotics for years. I am resilient, but my family was my anchor, the only thing that truly mattered in this God-forsaken world. The gallery sat paralyzed in dead silence. Everyone knew Vanessa's survival story was anything but a fairy tale. She finally dragged herself out of a coma weeks after the brutal massacre. She had to relearn how to walk, how to chew, how to simply exist inside a shattered, pieced back together physical shell. Agonizing therapy, reconstructive surgeries, a completely rebuilt jaw and a stitched-up skull hiding a deeply fractured psyche, still screaming for answers. She was taken in by Connie, Bruce's mother, the traumatized woman who had stumbled onto that bloodbath and carried its ghosts every single day. Connie raised the girl, clinging to the final living fragment of her slaughtered son, funneling every ounce of her broken soul into keeping that fragment breathing. It was an unnameable, fiercely profound act of love, but even the purest devotion cannot scrub away the stain of profound trauma. Vanessa matured while shouldering a dark, silent burden she lacked the vocabulary to explain. A physically ravaged body, a mind riddled with black holes, and the suffocating, inescapable reality of the massacre she narrowly escaped. By high school, she was self-medicating heavily. The blinding psychological agony demanded an outlet, and she cracked open the only escape hatches available. As a late teenager, the vicious downward spiral completely stripped away her control. Throughout her 20s, a crippling dependency swallowed her whole, burning bridges and obliterating personal connections. She lost her stability, had her own son ripped from her custody, and flushed away years in a brutal revolving door of the streets, handcuffs, and false starts. A nightmare loop that felt entirely inescapable. She tried to end it all. She surrendered her babies to the exact broken system supposed to guard them. She regained consciousness in twisted, dangerous spots no human being should ever see. Crushed under the gravity of a bloodbath she couldn't even recall, paying a daily toll for a stranger's sins. But at 30, a quiet switch flipped. No cinematic epiphany, just a slow, gritty, obstinate refusal to let the monsters keep tearing her down from the inside out. She checked into rehab, detoxed, and painstakingly reconstructed the future that had been hijacked in her infancy. She forged a new bond with her grown son, and finally found a loving partner. She took her horrifying truth public, refusing any pity, knowing her chilling survival story might just be the lifeline pulling someone else from the ledge. "I fought to shed the victim label," she revealed in a 2020 sit-down, "and weaponized my past to become an empowered survivor." The scars remain, crippling post-traumatic stress, bipolar disorder, and a permanent lingering paralysis gripping the left side of her body. Her family is completely erased from her mind. No echo of her mother's voice, no image of her dad, not even the innocent birthday celebration hours before a killer shattered her universe. She is constructing reality around a black void, so massive it would swallow anyone else whole. Yet, here she is, unbroken. 9 agonizing hours of jury deliberation. On August 6, 2021, the damning verdict dropped, guilty on all 3 charges. For Bruce, Deborah, and little Melissa Bennett, the presiding judge locked onto Alex Ewing and threw diplomatic etiquette straight out the window. He branded the slaughter an absolute abomination. 3 back-to-back life sentences, 0 chance of parole, ever. That sliver of daylight Ewing had been secretly plotting for the premature release documents, the sick dating profiles, his twisted future plans extinguished in an instant. The judge demanded if Ewing had a final statement. The killer just stared up. "No, thank you." That was his entire chilling response. 3 sickening syllables. The absolute limit of what Alex Christopher Ewing gave the bloodline he extinguished, the community he haunted, and the survivor who had just ripped her soul open on the stand to ensure justice. No, thank you. Fast forward to 2022, and the legal reckoning for Patricia Smith's savage murder finally hit its climax. A new jury, a fresh guilty verdict, and a 4th consecutive life sentence stacked on top of the 3 already chaining him down. Patricia's relatives agonized in the dark for 38 years. They finally got their closure, the exact same year Vanessa caught hers. Connie Bennett sat dead center through every brutal second of it. The fierce mother who rushed to East Center Drive on that freezing Monday simply because her instincts screamed danger. The woman who discovered her boy's mangled remains at the foot of those stairs. The matriarch who dedicated 37 grueling years to every single police briefing, covert meeting, and court date, clutching a desperate hope everyone else had abandoned. She rose to her feet and burned holes right through the sociopath who butchered her flesh and blood. "People might you brand this psychopath an animal," she stated coldly, "but I refuse. Even vicious beasts actually serve a purpose here." Stepping into the biting courthouse air, a reporter demanded to know if this nightmare was finally resolved. She paused, eyes hollow. "There is no magical closure," she whispered. "We just figured out how to carry the ghosts." The entire sinister mystery hinges on a solitary garage door, forgotten and cracked wide open on a freezing Sunday evening in January 1984. An exhausted man assumed his sanctuary was secure. Such a trivial oversight. An everyday mistake occurring in sleepy suburban cul-de-sacs nationwide every single night, usually without inviting pure evil. Bruce Bennett merely shrugged off his brother's passing warning, stepping across the threshold into his home. Moments later, a slaughter unfolded. 3 lives vanished, leaving a 3-year-old child to spend 40 years crawling out from the bloody ruins of a massacre erased from her memory. This horrific tragedy is hardly a cautionary tale about locking your doors. The chilling truth beneath the surface is infinitely heavier and far more crucial. It is a brutal warning that mundane choices invite unseen phantoms. It screams that our loved ones need our devotion today, not tomorrow, because security is a terrifyingly fragile illusion requiring fierce protection. Bruce was a proud Navy veteran chasing a quiet career, keeping the skies safe. That dream was butchered. His wife Deborah was a fierce matriarch who anchored her family through tragedy, emerging with ironclad resilience. She was robbed of her future. Little Melissa was 7 years old, innocently craving a normal birthday celebration. She never got the chance to blow out those candles. Then there is Vanessa, the lone survivor, the 40-year-old warrior who stared down the abyss in a courtroom, exposing the agonizing price of surviving the slaughter. She remains unbroken, still breathing. She vehemently denies the shadows their final victory. Because of her unyielding spirit, this macabre chapter concludes with a flicker of defiant hope instead of absolute despair. So hold your family close today. Never hesitate. But it leaves a lingering, disturbing question. What does true retribution actually look like in a bloodbath this vile? Do 4 consecutive life sentences balance the scales? Or is there an eternal bleeding deficit? Vanessa forged a new existence from decades of pure torment. What does her harrowing escape reveal to you about the dark, resilient core of human survival? Had forensic genetics been weaponized back in 1984, would this phantom have been caught sooner? And just how many innocent victims might still be walking among us today? The tragic massacre of the Bennett family serves as a harrowing reminder that safety is often a fragile illusion. For decades, the shadow of a January night in 1984 haunted Aurora, Colorado, all because of a single, mundane oversight, a garage door left cracked open. This story is a visceral educational warning that vigilance is the only armor for our sanctuary. Beyond the physical security of our homes, this case highlights the unyielding power of human resilience. Vanessa Bennett, the sole survivor, spent 40 years crawling out from the bloody ruins of a nightmare she couldn't even remember. Her journey through addiction and reconstructive surgeries to become an empowered warrior proves that while evil can shatter a bloodline, it cannot extinguish the spirit of a survivor who refuses to stay broken. We must also honor the relentless pursuit of truth. For 38 years, Connie Bennett and dedicated investigators refused to let a cold case die, proving that justice fueled by forensic innovation will eventually find its way to the predator's doorstep. Let this be a call to action. Cherish your loved ones today, protect your home fiercely, and never underestimate the weight of a ghost waiting for the light to finally break.